News!
Okay, we'll start with this. Alicia Baumgardner's official word as a result of the WBC's ruling that she did not intentionally ingest a banned substance for the purposes of an enhanced performance. Alicia stated, "I would like to extend my gratitude to the WBC for conducting a fair and comprehensive investigatory process, affording me the opportunity to fully present my case and considering my defense in its entirety. During the exhaustive assessment, the WBC reached a conclusion with which I agree. I am not now, nor have I ever been, guilty of intentionally ingesting or consuming any PED for performance enhancement purposes. I welcome and will proudly submit to random testing during the probationary period because I take immense pride in my dedication to this sport and doing things the right way. I am honored to represent all female athletes, the WBC, and all the sanctioning bodies as the undisputed super featherweight world champion, and I look forward to my next title defense. To everyone else, as I said before, the Queen is coming."
You guys know my stance.
I'm not hung up on this entire anti-doping fiasco, and if Alicia Baumgardner is boxing, then I'm watching. Simple as that. But for any of you out there that might want this entire fiasco deciphered, what the WBC is saying is they can't prove that Alicia intentionally took a banned substance, and she agrees with them. She didn't intentionally take a banned substance, which begs the question, then how did it get in her system?
Where did it come from?
As you can imagine, veteran promoter Lou Dibella, who promotes Christina Lenardatu, he was livid. He stated, "Not guilty of quote-unquote intentional ingestion. I can't. Fuck boxing. Let's stop making believe that there is any PED regulation in boxing. Nothing is consistent, enforced, rational, or clean.
He's one to talk.
Boxing is unclean. And I'm not just talking about performance-enhancing drug tests."
He's one to talk.
He wants to stand on principle when it involves one of Matchroom's fighters in a situation like this one, but what about when it was one of his own fighters? What about when, 2019, Heather Hardy tested positive for a banned substance?
In the Amanda Serrano fight.
Heather's explanation was she took a prescription medication for menstrual cramps. But when did she get this prescription? When was the drug prescribed? And why was VADA not told ahead of time? You know, they give you a form where you can divulge any medications that you're taking. You don't wait up until after you test positive for it, then come up with a lofty explanation. That is, you don't do that and then expect anyone to believe you.
Because at that point, no one will.
It's not like afterwards. Heather Hardy wasn't allowed to box. She was allowed to box. She did box. She's still boxing.
But Lou Dibella wants to stand on his soapbox, harping about consistency.
Oh, you want consistency?
Huh?
I got consistency. I got your consistency.
Huh?
Another one of Lou Dibella's fighters tested positive for a banned substance more recently, a testosterone derivative. Do you remember when Hannah Gabriels was supposed to be fighting Clarissa Shields for a second time? And do you remember that she had to withdraw because
That was just last year.
she tested positive for a banned substance ahead of what was supposed to be the Clarissa Shields rematch, has to withdraw, and the explanation is it came from her dog's medication.
The old dog ate my steroids excuse.
And after shit hits the fan, Lou Dibella, in an effort to cultivate sympathy for his fighter, the one who tested positive, he said that she's the real victim in the situation. She's the real victim here. Could you imagine if Eddie Hearn publicly said the exact same thing about Alicia Baumgardner and her situation because Lou Dibella did? If Eddie said that, they'd crucify him. But Lou said it,
So people don't care.
the point I'm making is that the consistency that Lou Dibella is asking for, he can find in himself, as he is consistently inconsistent. Rules for thee, but not for me.
Is that how it works? You don't want we should believe Alicia Baumgardner, but we were supposed to believe your fighters when they found themselves in that exact same situation?
You want to sermonize about boxing's revolving door policy when it comes to banned substances when one of your fighters was the beneficiary of that same revolving door policy. Thus, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and you better watch your mouth because what you're saying's bordering on slander.
I don't think anyone can stand on a soapbox and point the finger at anybody else in the sport of boxing on both sides of the business, not even the fans, when they watch this stuff.
Next month, Tyson Fury, who's tested positive for nandrolone in the past, will be returning to action opposite the ring Alexander Usyk in the undisputed heavyweight title fight. Now, you tell me how many boxing fans are going to stand on principle and boycott that fight on the premise that Fury's tested positive for a banned substance. The truth is, nobody cares that much, and I'm one of the only content creators that's willing to say it. Not the fans, not the fighters, and not the promoters who promote them, Lou Dibella included.
So can the altruism, because whatever Eddie Hearn is guilty of, you're just as guilty.
Whatever you presume Alicia Baumgardner is guilty of, Heather Hardy and Hannah Gabriels, your fighters, are just as guilty.
You know my stance.
If Alicia's boxing, then I'm watching. And I'm not going to apologize for that. In men's lightweight news, Vasyl Lomachenko versus George Kambosos deal done, likely for May 12th in Perth. What is a battle of the former champions, an IBF champion, a new one, will be crowned as a result, in spite of Vasyl Lomachenko sitting out for a year.
That is, he will have sat out for a year.
Still widely favored to win. Vasyl Lomachenko and George Kambosos will fight a little later than anticipated, but their lightweight championship clash will still take place in Kambosos' home territory of Australia. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that representatives for Ukraine's Lomachenko and Kambosos have finalized the deal for them to meet May 12th for the vacant IBF lightweight title that Devin Haney recently vacated. ESPN.com's Mike Kopinger first reported the date for Lomachenko versus Kambosos during an ESPN Plus stream Saturday night on the To a Better Be versus Callum Smith show.
Why Australia?
Because it's a bigger fight in Australia than it would be anywhere else. You could probably get more people to come see it, come to it in Australia than you could in America. BoxingScene.com has also learned that Bob Arum's Top Ranking, which promotes Lomachenko and co-promotes Kambosos along with Dibella Entertainment, are in the process of completing a site deal with the Australian government that would bring the Lomachenko versus Kambosos bout to Perth, Australia, clear across that continent from Kambosos' hometown of Sydney. Lomachenko and Kambosos could headline a card at the RAC Arena, a 15,000-seat venue in Perth, the capital and largest city in Western Australia.
Government funding.
Yet another reason to do it on the Australian continent. You wouldn't get government funding for that same fight on this continent or in this country. You wouldn't get government funding for a Lomachenko versus George Kambosos fight from the US government, but you could get it from the Australian one. George Kambosos' two 12-round unanimous decision defeats. The former undisputed lightweight champion Devin Haney both took place in Melbourne in southeastern Australia. Haney won their first fight at the Marvel Stadium in June of 2022 and their rematch at the Rod Laver Arena in October of that same year. The Lomachenko versus Kambosos card will be held on a Sunday morning and afternoon in Australia, but the event will be broadcast by ESPN Live the night of May 11th in the United States time zones. They can be a bitch.
What are the Australians, 12 to 14 hours ahead of us?
It's my understanding. Is this all to suggest that George Kambosos is the A-side to Vasyl Lomachenko? Because Vasyl Lomachenko is the one traveling to his neck of the woods, not the other way around.
I mean, that is one way to look at it, but I think the situation is a little bit more nuanced than that.
Vasyl Lomachenko wanted a rematch with Devin Haney, but Haney didn't see the need for a second fight and felt he could no longer safely squeeze his 5'9" frame down to the lightweight limit of 135. A fight with since crowned WBC lightweight champion Shakur Stevenson was proposed to Lomachenko, but he opted to face Kambosos for the unclaimed IBF belt, what has given rise to some criticism that Vasyl Lomachenko is avoiding Shakur Stevenson. I choose not to look at it that way.
Why?
Because I'd prefer that Lomachenko get himself back in the winner's bracket before he fights Shakur Stevenson. I think he can. A lot of other people do, as does current reigning two-division champion Teofimo Lopez, who says not only does Lomachenko stop Kambosos, but he's going to make him look like an amateur.
This fight with George doubles as both a tune-up fight and a title fight, allowing Vasyl Lomachenko to pick up a title and then bring it to a Stevenson fight. And I like those circumstances.
More than I like him coming right off that loss to Devin Haney than going right into a fight with Shakur Stevenson.
If Shakur were to win, you would only be able to give him but so much credit for the victory when Vasyl Lomachenko's coming off both a loss and a stint of inactivity. No, I'd prefer he get himself back in the winner's bracket, pick up a title along the way, then bring it to a Stevenson fight.
Teofimo thinks he's going to win. Not only does he think he's going to win, he thinks he's going to make George look like an amateur, and he thinks he's going to stop George. Not only does he stop George Kambosos, he's going to make him look like an amateur that night, Lopez told BoxingScene.com. Mark my words, because it's different when you face Lomachenko. It is so much different, man. You've got to be in there to really experience it. And it's good, though. You know what? Kudos to George. He's going to go and face one of the toughest fighters in that division, and that's Vasyl Lomachenko. Good for him. Lopez hopes to eventually avenge the only loss of his pro career, a 12-round split decision defeat to Kambosos in November of 2021 in the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden in New York. By the time that rematch materializes, however, Lopez is sure Sydney's Kambosos will have suffered his third defeat at the hands of Vasyl Lomachenko.
I don't think a rematch between Teofimo and George is for the fans per se or for the record keepers. I think it's really to settle Teofimo's soul.
Yeah.
So that he can know he's better than this guy. He was always better than this guy.
Yeah.
And he just happened to get caught at the right time.
I believe that is Teofimo's rationale. I myself am not making excuses for him, because even if George managed to catch him at the right time, that's Teofimo's own fault. That's his fault for spending so much time on this fight, chasing a slightly bigger bag. You lost a year in between the Lomachenko fight and the Kambosos fight, and that never would have happened if it wasn't for you chasing a slightly bigger bag. You should have did it at the price that Top Rank wanted to do it, because then you would have got it over with and moved on. You wanted to drag it out.
It's his own fault.
I definitely expect Loma to beat him, Lopez said. You know how pissed off Loma is after beating Haney and not getting the undisputed championship titles? Trust me, that guy's coming back with some vengeance. He's gonna bring what he learned from the war into the boxing game, and that's dangerous. And Lomachenko is already a dangerous fighter as it is. Trust me, I know. I faced him, and I faced him in his prime. So this is a good turnaround, and all I can say is, Vasyl Lomachenko, I'll get your get back with Devin Haney, and you get my get back with George Kambosos, and we'll do that together, my brother. Don't worry, we're gonna humble all these guys in our division.
Seems that young Teofimo has vengeance on his mind.
As Matchroom impresario Eddie Hearn fires back at him, saying he's fucking completely deluded. Maybe in the sport of boxing, to be a professional boxer, a successful one, to some degree you have to be, but Teofimo is often described as a guy who gets carried away. Lopez's claims of being a box office draw and their animus reached a new point, the animus between Eddie and Teofimo, when Lopez insisted his title fight with Josh Taylor this past summer set a record for ticket sales at the Hulu Theater in Madison Square Garden. Lopez, the former unified lightweight champion, defeated Taylor by unanimous decision to earn Taylor's WBO 140-pound title. To everybody out there in boxing and to all the casual fans listening to this right now, Eddie Hearn is a fluke and a liar and lying to you guys, Lopez said recently. The thing that he said about me saying I can't sell out arenas and stuff, you know, not only did we sell out, me and Josh Taylor, for the theater at Madison Square Garden, you also know what else we did?
What?
We hit the highest gross in boxing history, presenting in the theater at Madison Square Garden.
I don't believe him.
Lopez versus Taylor, good fight that it was. It wasn't reported to have broken any records. A gobsmacked Hearn disputed that claim, saying Lopez might need to check his head for a few loose screws. Hearn said Lopez has an axe to grind with him because Hearn had presided over Lopez's lightweight title defense against George Kambosos back in 2021. Kambosos upset Lopez with a split decision win. Teofimo Lopez is on another planet, Hearn told Boxing Scene.
It's not Boxing Scene, it's Boxing Social.
Firstly, all this beef with me is because he lost to George Kambosos, and he feels that it was my fault that he didn't get the decision because, as you remember, he said, if this was a top-ranked show, I would have won that fight. What the fuck, like guy? He talks so much. By the way, what a fighter and what an entertainer. Amazing for the sport, but just as diluted as Eddie describes, because it is true. That is what Teofimo Lopez said. He said that if that would have been a top-ranked show, he would have got the decision, but you're the reason it wasn't a top-ranked show. When Top Rank wanted to do it, you didn't want to do it at their price. So you shopped the fight elsewhere.
Yeah.
You let it go to a purse bid.
We already know what happened.
I think he's completely deluded,
Yeah.
and I think he's on another planet. That is what I think. But sometimes you have to be to do what he does, to go in there and beat Lomachenko, to beat Josh Taylor. You probably have to be a little bit whacked. I'm not mad about it. I don't hate the guy. I just listen to his interviews and go, you talk absolute shit.
Nonsense.
We crept over the line for a sellout at the Hulu Theater for Lopez versus Kambosos. He didn't sell out against Josh Taylor. He talks about the biggest gate in the history of the theater. That's complete rubbish. And by the way, it holds about 3,900 seats. So you're capping about selling 3,800 tickets, and you're this megastar who should be getting 20 million. He's an amazing fighter, but just calm down.
Why would Teofimo Lopez openly lie about what he's generating as a fighter?
Leverage tactics. He's exaggerating about what he draws and what he brings in and how much attention his fights get. He's exaggerating. He's embellishing it a bit as a leverage tactic against future opponents. In order to achieve A-side status over them, he's going to exaggerate about how big a draw he is. It's easy to see. Lopez didn't break any records with the Taylor fight.
It was a good fight and a fantastic performance from Teofimo, but nobody in his team is gonna reel him in.
When he starts getting carried away, like when he said that he's a two-time undisputed champion, that's not the case. He was never undisputed. When he claimed to have started that trend in the modern era, when both Terence Crawford and Alexander Usyk were already undisputed champions before he beat Vasyl Lomachenko. Not that beating Lomachenko made him undisputed anyway.
He didn't have all the belts. Devin Haney still had the WBC World title.
And what Teofimo Lopez had was a franchise designation that doesn't even exist anymore. I think it's how Eddie Hearn says. To be in Teofimo Lopez's line of work, that line of business, you do have to be a bit deluded. You do have to be a bit delusional. You have to believe in yourself when nobody else does. An occupational hazard, and I understand that, but even with that, some guys really do get carried away, and Teofimo is one of them.